Thank you very much, Raffaella, for the wonderful introduction. And it's an honor to be here at ARTCaffè again, and this time as a speaker. So I'm very proud to have been invited and also to be a connecting node for this wonderful tradition that has continued from Shanghai and to now to Seoul and around the world. Which is a wonderful opportunity to sort of share and discuss art in this informal way, which is great. And I'm excited to share a new work with you all today. And it's a single new work. It will open officially next week in Saigon, Vietnam. So we're sort of ahead of the fact. It was supposed to be after the opening, actually, but through a weird twist of fate, as these things happen, we're now actually sort of before the real event. You get a sort of live preview of this work, a sort of a premiere, if you like, and yeah, so it's a good opportunity. So please ask any questions and be sort of like, yeah. So we can sort of debug the concept a little bit. um, yeah, so yeah, we will start with a trip down memory lane, however. And this was when you indeed visited the studio in Shanghai. This was one of the works that was in the studio at the time. And amongst many other works, as you mentioned, sort of an explosion of my mind of every surface from floor to ceiling. And well, this was one of the works of a series on a sort of Shanghainese woven bed, and it's a self-portrait amongst a group of men. And why I wanted to start here is first of all, it was in the studio when you were there. This is a picture from later in ZhouKe Art Museum. But it's the woven sort of canvasy texture from this sort of Hessian rope material. But if you can imagine, there's this sort of like these large sort of gaps in between that. So there's this space where there isn't any material to work on for the paint. And especially when sort of painting details, let's say an eye or something, it was sort of very often there wasn't any room to actually paint that those type of details. But it was an interesting way of thinking of sort of trans within the sort of details, the lack of details, and your gap filling in the sort of the imagination, the gap being a sort of structural part of the process. And yeah, that fascinates me. And throughout my work, I'm much inspired by religious sites, or not so much for reasons of belief, but actually for a sort of visual, non-verbal storytelling, and especially through an incense burner or a folded joss paper or the stone or the cross, and all together there's sort of like not one thing in particular that holds that essence, but it's all sort of like that together, or indeed a framing of absence. Indeed sort of like that in that sort of myth making. I've named this talk myth making. And I borrow that word myth from a fantastic writer, Yuval Harari. I'm sure you're familiar with his work, where when he says, for instance, gods, money, and human rights are all sort of myths. And I'm fascinated in this sort of myth, sort of storytelling, visual storytelling, and the type of stories that I'd like to tell. I'm hugely inspired by the work of magic realist works. So writers like Marquez or Salman Rushdie. And years ago, reading those books, and I thought, wow, it would be great if I could make art like that. And so I tried to sort of create this constellation of sort of works and this is actually the first time I'm showing this new project titled ZhouKe. And this is a metaphysical sculpture that's distributed amongst objects, images, and networks. And the sculpture, as I'm sort of presenting it to you today, is this sort of unit of cultural information. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll have a good idea of sort of like what, and that in fact is the artwork. And so these other sort of objects, these constellations of works that are created to sort of as a sort of visual language to sort of tell this story, to create this story, and this character in this case. The character is based very much on physiologically, but also in spirit on my wife. It's from the days in Shanghai, like where we met. My wife is Shanghainese, and this through these conversations that we would have, daily life in China, living in China, feminist histories, data politics, all sort of things, and Chinese internet culture, that sort of thing, that they sort of like became a sort of an expression through in this character, sort of this work, where identity was sort of a material, clay-like material to sort of play with, to sort of create this. And what ended up happening was sort of I started off by maybe creating a character, and then later I had to negotiate with her in terms of what I could allow, what sort of like the idea of authorship, and the questions about how much do you sort of permit to leave, and yeah, and within that, this sort of curation of this character, I suppose, and that was a sort of a negotiation and a struggle at times, and so it's been 9 years in the making, this project, and so we've set up this show opening next week, as I mentioned, and I will walk you now through the sort of the different instances that are present in this show, so I'll give you a bit of an idea there. As we start, we enter by this fantastic building in Saigon, Vietnam. And there is this projection of a generative artwork, which engages in this language of sort of gestural marks here. As you can see here, there's this black line, and at times it tries to sort of fill in the whole screen, and always sort of fails by this. So it is it's not a video, it's a generative artwork coded that will continuously repeat and not repeat. So it's continuously generating. Thank you. And yeah, so and it's sort of this Sisyphean doomed to fail sort of enterprise there, and with the bucket and mop filled with ink, the bucket, so you get that smell of that ink, and it sort of gives you a sort of an idea of the language for the rest of the show as we step in. Here we have the entrance, which is boarded up, so completely boarded up, with this sort of hole opening, carved, broken in sort of through, entering this space, and you sort of enter this another world with this neon sign there which says chai, and which means to break down, to tear down. And I don't know if you remember seeing that. Yeah,
it was everywhere in China.
Yeah,
when they mark, mark with that sign those buildings, walls around the city that are going to be destroyed.
Yes.
So it's also a sign of gentrification, in a way.
Or redevelopment.
Yes.
And very often in the area where I lived, there was also for illegal or illicit activities, there would the government hello the government would come in one day and sort of like stop these illegal activities, and then board up the entire building, and then spray paint this mark sort of crudely on there, and sort of like say, okay, so you sort of that idea, okay, you're going to enter this another world, yeah. And then here is the part of that same experience, which you would also see ubiquitous throughout China. These these pillars with these PA systems, announcement systems of what to do and what to think. And this plays a sort of metallic sort of heartbeat. So we just get this with this sort of I like the long sort of wire there, almost like an umbilical cord that sort of connects this this heartbeat that sort of drones you almost sort of into this experience. And then in the center of the space, we have this introduction of the sort of the physiological and the sort of identifying marks of this character. And here we have it's a hologram as well as a sort of fence-like structure with sort of stainless steel barbed wire, razor wire type fencing. And the character itself is this sort of animation of a sort of idle character animation in a sort of game language where you have this sort of before you pick a character sort of you have this sort of like idle type animation waiting a couple of it and it really gets to the sort of the heart of the whole artwork, which is this the mind body sort of problem, and that's what this sort of symbolizes, as well as this introduction of sort of uniform and character. And uniform is sort of three ways. It's one way is to a sort of anonymity there. We see the uniform, not the yeah, exactly. Yeah. And there's that it's the uniform of a street clean, so sort of the yeah, like you see everywhere around China. So this sort of street cleaner, this almost sort of like making that visible, which is very much invisible in this sort of society. And then sort of turning this in character and then also using that as a unifying sort of element throughout all these instances as a recognizable language. Okay. And this is another is a free channel video called Patriarchy, where we see ZhouKe arm wrestling a digger in this landscape, and this digger is this sort of towering over her mechanical sort of monster, but yet a tool. And I like these little details. There's a little sort of phallic sort of shape there in the digger as well. And yeah, it introduces also this idea between the real and the virtual, which parts are constructed through the virtual and the digital. There's sort of the blurring of that. And then there's a series here of several safety vests, these sort of high vis vests, and these have been embroidered with sort of protest language. So there's this within the character and the politics of this character that there's this aestheticization of protests, really. And in this you can see one there that says totally uncreative picnicking, which was in the early days of the you're all familiar with ChatGPT, of course, household name now. And but in the early days of these LLMs, you could sort of like these open source LLMs, you would train them on these data sets. And I trained it on these huge amount of English language swear words from from Shakespearean times right till sort of now. And it came up with these interesting swear words such as totally uncreative picnicking and spider player and some other ones that are sort of embroidered in these high vis vests. And there's also that sort of creativity in language, this bypassing of censorship, this which is part of the sort of the protest. Like now, for instance, you'll see a lot on social media, for instance, the alternative spellings of Israel and Gaza to sort of get past sort of censorship there from platforms, moderation. And that moderation is also interesting sort of element within that sort of uniform again. The cleaning up, sort of like that metaphor. Here is a another sort of element in those embroiders, which is this sort of star, which with the on the side on the in the middle there, you have that sort of crude sketch of the first version of it several years ago, which is much more recognizable, where that sort of idea of sort of labeling comes from, which is now this sort of digital sort of labeling, and then making that sort of cute. There is this sort of language, this aestheticization or cutifying almost of these sort of systems of power. And I think that's what I want to share there with this sort of 5 stars, a little badge, sort of 5 stars, and that we also hand out as stickers for in the show. But this is sort of like this cutifying and of these. For instance, this is for the 5 star. Sorry, I forgot to introduce what that is about. That is about this um, the social credit system. Yeah. This so this social credit system, and which is sort of another way of sort of marking us, rating us, and again these these power systems. Sorry, and so yeah, let's leave it at that. And here on the wall we have a series of um glass sort of iPhone type screens, and they are games, so sort of like a sort of mobile game type landscapes and scenes where this character, uh, yeah, there's and sort of it's sort of her fantasy. Do your kids play mobile games?
No.
No.
Zero.
Good. Yeah,
this policy in the house.
Yeah, I understand. It's very addictive. It's worse than heroin, I think, at some point. Yeah. Mm. The good old days of heroin. Yeah. Yeah, so these are sort of, but this is really her fantasy, and it's sort of like her fantasy within that character. And there's a series of these phone type screens. And another playful way, there's a pedestal with a glass without the illustrative image there that I've added for this presentation. But this is called surveillance transmitter, and yeah, so again, it's sort of a playful type within this language of power structures, which we are, and this character also engages in. So she's these whole systems of power dynamics and structures that she is also complicit in some ways in this creation of this. So it's yeah. Anyway, and this is a piece. There's an AR installation, and people are encouraged to scan, and then you can see this on your phone, which is one of these cleaning trolleys, which I'm sure you recognize, and it is a beautiful sort of sculptural quality it has to it as well. There's this, there's a very sort of informed in color and in sort of organization within its the items, and it is titled May 35th, which is a reference online to the tragedy in Tiananmen Square, and so this work is not about that, which predates, all of this and my experience there and all of that. It's not about that. It's really about sort of like this internet cleanup that is there around that, and this creativity, for that matter, this May 35th, which is this wonderful sort of creative way of, well, we'll just add a few more days this last month to be able not to mention the dates, which is illegal to mention online. And this space that we have, there's a tradition to always have a work in the toilet as well. So we continue that where we place this sort of signage with a QR for the Instagram. So there's an Instagram account for this character, which is really her own account, her own sort of thought. It's an autonomous bot. It's a bot. There's plenty of those online, of course, and it's the handle is ZhouKe, which is the Chojin is the was this revolutionary feminist poet, and it's sort of her inspiration. This is her own poetic revolt on these platforms, and is much engaged with sort of humanitarian issues, activism, and human suffering, which is sort of fascinating for a disembodied figure to sort of emphasize. Anyway,
Be empathic with, right?
yes, thank you. With yes, thank you very much. This is her Instagram account, her thoughts, her world, if you like. And this is a sort of continuous, sort of physical version of that, where we have these polished stainless steel protest placards, and they're sort of grouped together. It's called Herd, and but you reflect the viewer, and in the same way, sort of these Instagram, she follows these whatever's sort of trending in terms of protest. That's a protest as activism, as a sort of aestheticization of that performance or sincerity. It's sort of in between there, and you know, it questions those relations. And here, this viewer is actually sort of placed in that idea. And the other thing I like about these is that they're almost like weapon-like. They have these sort of sharp edges. They almost look sort of weapon like, which is yeah, interesting for your the power of your word. Um, and then there is this a piece. This was a previous. So a lot of these works I've sort of tested out to see how it would work in previous. So this is a little peephole, as you would use a sort of like a peephole in an apartment building, also. And then, but it's you would see yourself through a security camera. So you're looking at yourself through a security camera, and in this new show, there's a version of it with a VR headset where you kind of become the security camera and or seeing yourself, having the power to sort of look around and survey, and thereby becoming implicit in this sort of, yeah, nonlinear power structure that we have created. And on the second floor, there's this annex where we built a small room, and it shows the surveillance camera, sort of 8-channel video work of ZhouKe, sort of dutifully blacking out these rooms. And there is she's yeah, sort of at times is sort of bored, tired, and sort of like, yeah, blacking out these rooms in an act of censorship or erasure. And the constellation of it is sort of in this 2x4, almost as a cut through, as a block of flats, or something like a urban landscape. On the way up, we have this flag created by I have a whole series of these works which were made using these beautifying soft, you know, like as you take selfies, beauty software, painted in oil and glitters. So it's sort of like this aestheticizing of power again. Here we can see that, and this is another small print in the show at the top of the stairs, and it is a hand simply holding a flag above an island, which is a claim to, yeah, to land. The interesting thing here is that it's completely created with AI. So it's sort of, there is no land, there is no hand, and there is a sort of like, and it questions this sort of new the AI arms race, as it's often called, between sort of mainly China and America, and then this new, you know, land that our minds and our, you know, yeah, identities as we're being framed by, yeah, more and more being turned uniformed by these systems measuring social media and rating systems, etc. And then finally, uh, again, sort of ZhouKe phonetically English is also sort of like Joker, which is not a coincidence. And here we have a work where there's a glove simply nailed to the yeah to the to the wall, and it's titled Shan, which means mountain. And there is this sort of motif running through the exhibition where the landscape is important. So the landscape as an internalized process, and especially in sort of Chinese culture as well, that landscape and landscape painting, which was one of the reasons why I actually moved to China in the very beginning, was to sort of study more of that. Uh, and then realizing in contemporary China, there's not, yeah, there's not much of that, but there's a vastly other world, which is very interesting. So, yeah, and this is also created. This work was entirely sort of created by the bot, and or thought of by the bot, and I became just a sort of just executed it. Yeah, and so it was a rather, in terms of authorship, that sort of thing, sort of given up that to this bot, to this character. And on that note, this whole project is also released as under the Creative Commons sort of open source. So it is sort of like it is beyond me. It is a system. I wanted to create a sort of a system, a thing that could be outside of my control. Yeah. So that was this questioning through this, if I could create this, and this is how it's been put together. And anyway, yeah, that's. I hope if you are in Saigon next week, that you can come see it. But for now, I hope to have given you this sort of unit of cultural information, which is in fact the artwork. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.